Alright, today we're going to be talking about BO4 and why I think it's the best Call of Duty's zombies game out there. In my recent ranking of all COD zombie games, I had this under BO3 at number 2, but I personally believe BO4 is a lot better than BO3. The pretty much only reason BO3 is above it is because of the custom maps and mode that it has. If BO4 did have that, I believe it would be atop of my list. But anyway, I know BO4 has some issues. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't, but it also has some of the best maps and Easter eggs in all of COD Zombies. Let's go through some of the things. The hype for the game was insane. The marketing, the trailers, Jason Blundell going on Twitch and YouTube with some of the biggest creators at the time talking about the game. All of it was insane. The game came out on October 12th, 2018, and it did have quite a messy launch with bugs, crashes, and blue screens. But this game came out with 3 zombies maps and 1 bonus map, which is insane for zombies. We've never seen that before, and we haven't seen it since then. Name another game that has released more than 2 maps at launch. There hasn't been one. 9. This map is one of the best starter maps, and it's really beginner friendly, which is very nice. The atmosphere of a gladiator arena is insane. The crowd cheering and booing based on how you play is awesome. Throwing stuff is pretty cool. The Easter egg is amazing, and the boss fight at the end is pretty magical. If you haven't played this map, play it. It's great. Easter egg is amazing. Blood of the Dead. Yeah, it didn't live up to the Mob of the Dead, but as a standalone map, it's still pretty good. The map gets fun, new areas, add content, and the Ether story moments are emotional, especially at the end with Richtofen sacrificing himself. That was probably one of the most tearful things ever. Voyage gets hate, and some of it is deserved because the corridors are pretty tight, but the Titanic setting is pretty cool, and the Kraken Wonder Weapon with elemental upgrades is pretty good. It's not a bad map. It is quite hard how tight it is. People confuse those two. Classified. This is a great bonus map. It's just 5 with some added areas and mechanics. The Easter egg isn't great just because it's just get to a high round and watch a cutscene, but as a bonus map, it is pretty cool. The perk system is the thing that everybody complains about. They remove crutch perks such as Juggernaut, Speed Cola, Quick Revive, and Double Tap. But here's the thing. Was it actually bad, or was it just different? Something that you're not used to. The old system meant you bought the same 4 perks every game, on every single map for 10 plus years. You buy Jug, you buy Speed, you buy Double Tap, and then whatever. Most of the time it's Quick Revive if you're playing solo. Most of the time it's either Stand Up or PhD if that's on the map. That's not a choice. That's a routine. BO4 forces you to actually think about your perk loadouts. You have to pick 4 perks before the game and decide what works for your playstyle and the map you're playing. That's more strategic than mindlessly buying Jug first every game. Obviously in BO4 there has become some crutch perks such as Death Witch, but I do believe not a lot of people pick that every single time. Not everybody picks that every single time. Everybody picked Jug every single time. Yeah, losing Jug felt weird at first, but they compensated by giving you more base health. The effective gameplay wasn't that different. You just didn't have to spend the 2,500 points on a perk you literally couldn't play without. They also incorporated the other crutch perks. Quick Revive was replaced by just giving you 2 self-revives at the start. Speed Cola was incorporated by getting all 4 of your perks. And Double Tap is just by pack-a-punching your weapon 5 times. I'm not saying the new system was better, I'm saying it wasn't a disaster people make it out to be. It was just like a different approach, and if people actually gave it a chance instead of rage quitting and just trashing on it because Juggernaut is gone, they might have enjoyed it. The Chaos story gets dismissed because it's not Ether, but that's not the story's fault, that's the fan base refusing to move on. BO3 kinda ended the Ether story, but then BO4 brought it back, which was fine. But I do think introducing a new story because you're winding down the Ether story is good. And I do think the Chaos story had a good solid start. The crew had pretty good personality. Some were as good as others, like Bruno wasn't as good, or Scarlet and Diego. But mythology with the ancient artifacts was interesting and different from the Ether's timeline. I think it's a lot better how they incorporated real life stuff into the Chaos in terms of mythology. I think that's pretty cool. 9 introduced the story in an exciting, accessible way. Voyage expanded it, and then Dead End Night added the horror aspect of that, and then Ancient Evil peaked with incredible gameplay and story. the Chaos story was building towards something great, and Treyarch killed it because fans wouldn't stop screaming for Ether and how much everybody hated the Chaos story. And then what happened? The Ether ending was rushed onto remake maps because nobody was happy with that either. The fan base rejected Chaos, demanded Ether, and then complained of how Ether ended. BO4 couldn't win. I'll give people this. The Ether story ending on remakes was disappointing. After 10 plus years of build-up, ending the saga on Blood of the Dead, Classified, Alpha Omega, and Tag der Toten, all of them are remakes. It did feel cheap. Alpha Omega specifically, people were expecting a brand new original map for this chapter since this was the first Ether story after getting 2 Chaos maps, but instead they got Nuketown reimagined. That was a letdown, and I'll understand the frustration, but I do think Alpha makes up for it. The Easter egg and even the bunker is pretty cool. I do think Alpha Omega is still a pretty good map. It's one of my guilty pleasures in BO4. I do think it's pretty good, to be honest. Tag der Toten as a grand finale, the Ether story being Call of the Dead remake or remaster was rough. The ending cutscene was emotional and well done, but the map it was tied to didn't feel like a proper send-off for a decade-long story. I did put Tag der Toten as one of my most underrated maps, and I do think of that just because it is Call of the Dead, but it adds a lot more than what Call of the Dead had. And you do play as the Victus crew, which sucks because it's the last Ether story and you're playing as a different crew, which I don't believe is good, but the ending for Ether story with Tag der Toten is probably one of the best things about Tag der Toten. So yeah, the Ether handling was a valid complaint, but one bad decision doesn't make the rest of the game. People forget that BO4 Zombies had 8 maps. 8. That's the most any single zombie game has ever had, if you don't include survival maps, because I don't believe that's a valid thing to do it. It's more than BO3's 6, more than BO2's 6 maps, more than even BO1's maps. 8 maps meet 8 different settings, 8 different types of wonder weapons, 8 different Easter eggs, 8 different experiences. Yeah, even if mostly remakes, it's still they're pretty different. They're not like one-to-one remake. The closest one would be Classified or Blood of the Dead, but it does add a couple more spaces to it. Even if you do hate half the maps, there's still 4 maps with a good content. Compare that to Cold War, which had 4 round-based maps, and Outbreak. Or Vanguard, which had 4 maps total and 2 even round-based. BO4 gave you more zombies content than almost any other game, and somehow it's the one that gets a lot of the hate. I do think a lot of people are coming around to it just because of what we've gotten lately, and people are starting to go back and play it and realize how good it is. People don't talk about the special weapons in BO4 with the hammer, the scepter, the katana, etc. They were pretty fun. They gave you a powerful melee weapon that charges through kills and provides unique abilities. They're pretty much just the field upgrades like we have now, but I do personally believe these are a lot more fun than the field upgrades because the field upgrades just feel generic, while these are pretty cool to use. I do see the argument that they should have been unique to each map, or at least earnable in-game, but they're still a blast to play with. BO4 did have its fair shares of mishaps. I do agree. No game is perfect. The bugs and crashes at launch were pretty bad. The perk system did change the flow of the game. The HUD was cluttered and messy. The story for both Chaos and Aether could have been handled better. The Aether maps shouldn't have been all remakes. And the point system being changed. These are all valid criticisms. I'm not ignoring them. I just think there's a lot more good in this game than there is bad. BO4 Zombies isn't perfect. It has real problems that I do acknowledge, but calling it one of the worst zombie games when it gave us 9, Dead of the Night, Ancient Evil, a mob remake, 8 total maps, and the most content in franchise history, that's not fair. If you haven't played BO4 Zombies since launch, go back and try it now. Play 9, play Dead of the Night, play Ancient Evil. You might be surprised of how much fun you've had. You're not comparing everything to BO3 and being one of those LARPers. Let me know in the comments, did you give BO4 a chance or did you write it off? And my top 5 underrated maps video, Dead of Night, is number 1 for a reason. Go check it out.